It was in the early days of the 16th president of the United States of America, after some lengthy debates with one of America's great orators in the person of Stephen Douglas. Abraham Lincoln was able to prevail. He won the presidency through what I would call a triangulation of the presidency, because Stephen Douglas was favorite. He was a great orator, and Abraham Lincoln was a failed congressman, a failed lawyer. By failed, compared to the fact that he ultimately became president of the United States. In many ways, a haunted man with his wife Mary and their children. His mother had died early. His father was not very much of a leader. He was stricken with sickness himself. And, he wasn't very much to look at, Abraham Lincoln. And he just milled around from Kentucky to Illinois, and he finally won a congressional seat in Washington, D.C., and stayed in Washington for a while, lost and returned back to his law practice in Illinois. And then we challenged Stephen Douglas to a couple of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, which has become historical in American political, if you will, presidential debates. And through a triangulation, Abraham Lincoln, against all odds, became the president of the United States of America. At the time, there were a large number of people that were so-called abolitionists, people who wanted to completely abolish slavery. Lincoln was not for that, but he felt that the spread of slavery should not go further, and had some idea about its constraints, but he was not a pure dyed-in-the-wool, if you will, abolitionist. Those who want to actually abolish slavery completely, and slavery was flourishing during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and during President Lincoln's time in Congress and his time as a lawyer and otherwise. But he won the presidency, and there were a large number of people who were states' rights and there was the Missouri Compromise about slavery and whether you could take a slave across state lines, with the Dred Scott decision, and whether slaves could be used by their owners as voting material. And so it was decided that the slave was not fully a voting rights person. He was only 3/5 of a man. Now, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution changed all of that. A black man was a Hamite, he was, Canaanite he is, and Lincoln watched all of this up front and up close and personal, and then became the president over a very tumultuous time in America. And though there was not Facebook or social media, the kinds of things that we have, that people would read the newspaper. There weren't even widespread newspapers. People would post something up on the side of a barn or a bar, and that's how people got their news. But it was a very tumultuous time. And Lincoln became the president. And shortly after him becoming the president of the United States of America, an unlikely person to be president, but he became America's 16th president. There was shots fired by some of the Southern soldiers, in as much as that the Union forces, or the Army itself, of the United States of the colonies, had a fort just off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, a couple of miles out, called Fort Sumter. And it was an outpost, pretty much guarding more against invasion from the Brits and others coming in along the eastern coast shoreline. So Fort Sumter was established, and it was a great place to have the fort. The general under the command of that fort was quite prestigious, and some of the Southern boys in South Carolina, Charleston, decided to fire on Fort Sumter. Now, there had been a lot of tension. South Carolina had been talking about secession. That is to say, they wanted to leave the Union altogether and start their own United States of America. And so South Carolina had been problematic. And then they fired on Fort Sumter. And the firing went on for a couple of days. Thusly began what we now know historically now as one of the bloodiest wars in American history, known as the Civil War. The war between a brother and brother, the war between the North and the South, the war between the Confederates and the Union forces, those who wore the gray, and those led by Robert E. Lee, one of the world's greatest generals, if you ask me. Robert E. Lee, you can say what you want about him. I think I know what I'm talking about. There's never been a general in any army that has been as great as Robert E. Lee. But anyway, Ulysses S. Grant led the the Union forces. And off to war they went, to Fredericksburg and to Bull Run and Shiloh and the battles and Sherman's march to the sea. Gettysburg was the humdinger of battles. And it slowly turned the tide against the Confederates in terms of their losing the war. And so it was. 4 years, it ended, and John Wilkes Booth put a bullet in the back of Lincoln's head, who wanted some reprieve, and decided to go out to the Ford Theater that night to watch some classic acting as the war had assuaged. I think it's important that we understand that American history soup to nuts. That was the, if you will, slavery Civil War, the issue of slavery Civil War. But we're now in another Civil War, and I want to call this war the, if you will, the Tribulation Civil War. When this assault on the Temple of Democracy took place on the 6th of January, that began the Second Civil War in America. Now, a large number of the participants in the Second Civil War, what I call the Tribulation-style Civil War, large number of them are sons of the Confederacy. Their fathers were Confederates, and they are the great-great-grandchildren of the Confederates. But throughout the length and breadth of the photos you're going to see here that took place on the 6th of January, what I'm referring to as the assault on the Temple of Democracy started the Second Civil War in America. And that Civil War goes on, as was the shots that were fired on Fort Sumter. That Civil War goes on as I speak, and it will continue. I think it's important as we look now at this assault on the Temple of Democracy, similar to the assault on Fort Sumter going back in the early days of the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. And of course, this now related to the early days of the presidency, or the affirming of the presidency, the ratifying of the certifying of the presidency of one Joe Biden, my time Biden. And so America is at Civil War, but I'm calling it the Tribulation-style Civil War. I've already said that. Let me further state, Mr. Engineer, thank you so very much. I appreciate that. That the war is underway. And as everybody has heard, there's been mega press given to General Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been now as one of the female generals that have come up out of the state of Georgia, who is leading, if you will, and giving vent and expression to the sentiments of the, if you will, those who attacked the Temple of Democracy, their ideology, whether it be from the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers or whoever, that Marjorie Taylor Greene has become the first female general in the Civil War, and has become a very powerful force within the Civil War and the contention that now sweeps across American politics. And we're going to see more of that. But I want to also state to you that this Civil War is not going to end. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be resolved. The January 6th commission, if there is one, or select committee, if that becomes away, or any legislation of the infrastructure, of the rebuilding of America, or dumping trillions of dollars into the American economy, is not going to end the Civil War. It is on. The Tribulation Civil War is on. And I want to advise you of this so that you can learn how to protect yourself and your family and prepare for the next 3 to 4 to 5 to 7 years of a bloody contest going on here in America. And let me tell you what's going to excite this even more so than the ratification or certification of Joe Biden as president, where many of the sons of the Confederacy believe that the election was stolen. We'll come back to the Arizona recount and From there, there'll be the Georgia recount, and there'll be even more, if you will, angst going on between the two. But here is the thing that's going to become extremely interesting, because, if you will, we'll use the Biden forces as the Union forces and the Trump forces as the Confederacy, that as the Biden forces align themselves now with the indictment of Donald John Trump, God's called him Tribulation Trump, when his children are indicted, Eric being indicted perhaps first, and Ivanka and Don Jr., being indicted on a large number, not just their interaction on civil issues where normally fines would be allocated for any misdoing of the corporation, but that the actions or the misgiving of the corporations, which is really Donald Trump's little mom and pop operation for the years, he never thought would ever be looked at this closely. And now they have discovered Letitia James, who is the Attorney General for the state of New York, has discovered, along with Cyrus Vance, who has now gotten Trump's long-awaited tax returns. The Supreme Court told Cyrus Vance, the New York District Attorney, that they can actually get Trump's tax returns. So they've got everything Trump has filed for years. And they have discovered not only civil, that is to say whether Trump did something civilly or didn't pay a bill or, beat somebody or he lied about this or that or the other. They have discovered vast wells of criminal activity by Trump, by his children, and by Alan Weisselberg. And so over the last 2 weeks, Letitia James and Cyrus Vance Jr. have come together in a very rare. The fact that Letitia James and Cyrus Vance have decided to work together as the state attorney general and the district attorney for the city of New York, because of the criminal activity of Trump himself, Trump's organization, is so massive. It's so massive that the two of them decided to work together. It would almost be like saying, get Black Lives Matter and the Proud Boys to come sit down and hold a picnic. That's how unusual it is. But it's unusual because they have discovered a truckload, if not a train load, if not a boatload of criminal, not just civil activity, similar things that a corporation does, a corporation pays fine. They have discovered criminal activity by Trump up the wazoo. And so the two of them are working together so they don't cross each other's paths. So when those indictments began to fall, and I suspect that the first to be indicted will be Alan Weisselberg's children, that they will be indicted, his son. And then Alan Weisselberg, and then Trump's children, and then ultimately Trump himself will be indicted. And when those things began to drop, I suspect they're going to drop somewhere around late summer, early fall, when those indictments, they could come as early as September. I don't think they're going to come during the summer months. But Cyrus Vance is retiring from his office of district attorney at the end of this year. So what if he's going to do? He's going to do it early enough to get it solidified into the court system before he walks away and leaves it to others, because the trial would go on for 2 to 3 years. But the indictments are going to come. Now, the reason why that's important, because when Trump gets indicted, first, if Alan Weisselberg gets indicted, and then Trump's children get indicted, what you saw happening on the 6th of January with what I'm referring to as the assault on the temple of democracy is going to look like somebody running in the park trying to lose weight. It's going to look like a Sunday picnic all across America. What will then happen? I did, going back, it was in 2010, that would be 11 years ago, I prophesied what I refer to as the White Rodney King, that the boys out of Tennessee, out of Alabama, out of Georgia, out of Louisiana, out of Texas, out of Ohio, out of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, West Virginia, is going to riot. I prophesied. I really did. It's called the White Rodney King. They took it down off of YouTube. You can probably find it someplace. And I said what you saw on the 6th of December was going to happen. Where the prophecy may have not been accurately skewed was I prophesied that these Proud Boys and Oath Keepers are going to march into black neighborhoods. They're going to march into the neighborhoods in Atlanta. They're going to march into the neighborhoods, the Hamite neighborhoods in Jacksonville, in Dallas, in Harris County, in Houston. That's what I prophesied. I thought that's where it's going to be, and come as far north as Baltimore, Philadelphia, and even New York, that they would march in what I refer to as the White Rodney King. But the fact that they went to the Temple of Democracy, well, that may have been a little bit off point rather. And the fact that, and I did not see, nor did I think that these people, who I felt had a legitimate reason for rioting, that the Japheth people, the Confederates, the sons of the Confederacy, I said, and I still believe, they have had a legitimate reason for rioting. Their reason was legitimate. Where, again, I may have missed the point, was that I never thought they'd do it for somebody as loathsome, as much of a con man and a degenerate as Donald John Trump. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see it. I saw the riot coming, and I can tell you now, I see more coming. I just didn't think they'd do it for somebody like Trump. I can't see, MacArthur and Patton and Eisenhower, the great generals, even Napoleon and a bunch of Alexander the Great. A lot of these soldiers, and the reason why they won so many battles, because a lot of these soldiers were willing to give their lives for the general, not just for the cause of the state. I never thought that anyone would consider Trump worth dying for. Because every last one of those persons, now listen to me very carefully, please don't misunderstand it. Don't misunderstand it, please don't misunderstand it. Every last one of those persons that you see right there, I guarantee you, I bet my seat in heaven, that every last one of those persons thought Trump was a con man when he first announced he's going to run. They thought he was a casino owner being married 4 times. They wouldn't walk across the street to spit on Trump. I guarantee it. Now, they carry Trump signs, Trump 2020, Trump 2024, but I guarantee you, I bet my seat in heaven in the hearts of every last one of those men that you've seen in all that footage going back to 6th of January, I guarantee you, not one of them would have voted for Trump when he first ran for president, because they understood him to be a con man. They understood him to be a fraud, a liar from way back when. They understood him to be a showed-up, stomped-down liberal, if you will, Democrat. Every last one of them. That's what they had in their hearts. What changed it? Let's go ahead and send you. Why did they all of a sudden now want to give their lives for him? Well, the truth of the matter is that they're not giving their lives for him now, but they understand that the well-being of who they are as people, the well-being of who they are as persons, is now being taken from them by the liberals, by the likes of a Camelback ain't Black Harris, by the likes of a Barack Hussein Obama, by the likes of Black Lives Matter, by the likes of the worship of George Floyd, and they've had enough. They've had enough. And Trump is willing to be a mouthpiece. So here's what you're going to see happen, and I promise not to inflict myself upon you any further. Trump's going to get indicted. His church is going to get indicted. Alan Weisselberg is going to get indicted. And the way these people are going to handle this is that they're going to start with death threats. You're going to see death threats of local congresspersons in the area of Florida, local Hamite leaders are going to be killed in area. I'm not saying that I'm going to promote this and I want this to happen. This is what I believe is going to take place. That many of these Hamites and people like Harris County or in Dallas or in New Orleans, you're going to see death threats. As far north as Michigan with Governor Whitmer. You're going to see actual shootings, kidnappings. When the indictments fall, hell is going to wake up and going to spew like a New York City fire truck spewing water on a 30-story building. And we're going to see assassinations as well. I'm not saying I'm promoting this. I'm just telling you we are in the midst of the tribulation-style civil war. And that's where we are. There will be a shutdown of the government. You have approximately 9 months before the government itself will actually be shut down. The end of the year, the beginning of the brand new year, our world is going to greatly change. Once those indictments fall and Trump is scheduled for trial, the defense of Trump is going to be something like you have never, thank you, that's beautiful, something like you have never, ever seen before. The defense, if you think this, and they were defending, on what they were doing in this photo, they were defending him. They were willing to assassinate Mike Pence to defend Trump. You know they're going to go after Hamites and other liberals in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, West Virginia, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee. That was their defense. They went there to defend Trump. And that was for his presidency. Wait till the indictment. So I think you get the idea. So we have some time. I'm going to prepare our ministry to deal with a disrupted America at its tribulation-style civil war coming up in about 9 to 10 months, maybe a year, but certainly not longer than that, what we're going to see happening. So I would suggest that you would organize your finances, that you would organize your lifestyles to deal with what will be the tribulation-style civil war. Now, one final thing, and I really promise not to inflict myself upon you any further after this, and that is that there is nothing that anybody can do about this. In fact, nobody's in charge that you know on planet Earth. Trump is not in charge. Cy Vance is not in charge. Letitia James is not in charge. The Proud Boys nor the Oath Keepers. Nobody's in charge on planet Earth. This is directly from the mouth of the Lord Jesus Christ. And my brother, if you think the first one was awesome, you haven't seen anything yet. I'm James David Manning, everybody. Stay tuned. I'll be giving you updates as the Lord will bring us along. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.